What's up, my know-it-alls? Well, it is time for a brand new episode of the Know-It-All Files. I know you've been waiting. I know you've been wanting to hear all about it. So what have we done? We went and got an old friend. Computer, let's start that intro. All right, so here we are. Welcome aboard the USS Know-It-All. I am, of course, your captain, Mr. Know-It-All, and we're going to start with some really fun questions. What is the Know-It-All Files? The Know-It-All Files, put simply, is that I have gone through the internet, the likes of Quora and the comment sections and everywhere, and I have found your burning questions about Star Trek, and this is the very beginning of that. And what I do is I get the chance to show off. This is Mr. Know-It-All talking about all the things that I know, and hopefully making you a know-it-all in the process. If you like the videos, click and subscribe, and let everyone know that you want to be part of the Know-It-All Nation, or you'd like to join the crew, the USS Know-It-All. But without further ado, computer, first question.
Stefan Ritter asks, of all the corrupt admirals seen in Star Trek, who is your favorite and why?
Okay, that's a great one. Of which of the admirals, let's see, who do I like the most, huh? Well, my favorite. I think that, so there have been a few of late. There was, the most recent was Admiral Brent Amigo from Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, the finale, The Stars at Night. There's been, of course, some of the classics like Nora Seti, from the Next Generation episode, The Drumhead. She was pretty awesome, came out of retirement just for all those situations. Of course, it was Toddman from Deep Space Nine's The Die Is Cast. I love that episode. Eric Pressman, the Next Generation's The Pegasus. Then, of course, there's Alexander Marcus, Star Trek Into Darkness, and, of course, Leighton from Deep Space Nine's Homefront, as well as Paradise Lost. Also, Mark Jameson from the Next Generation's episode Too Short a Season. Who could forget Dougherty from Star Trek, Star Trek Insurrection? That's the Next Generation movie. Then there was, from the Ensign Rowe episode, there was Kennelly. That's right, Admiral Kennelly. But for me, the cake comes to Star Trek The Undiscovered Country. It's Star Trek 6 for those of you playing at home. Specifically the character of Cartwright. Why is Cartwright such a big thing? Cartwright goes back to Star Trek 4 in terms of importance. And by importance, I don't mean that we hadn't seen him before, but I mean in terms of he was there, he was fundamental to the people who was, he's the one that when they come back in time, he's like, get him back, get him back, get him back, get him back. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. And so for me, I feel like that particular betrayal was one of the bigger, more important betrayals that you could really, really think about and really kind of delve into. And I feel like it's definitely one that I think is worth mentioning, if nothing else, just sort of putting out there as if you have to have a favorite Badmiral, if you will, Cartwright's definitely mine. But hey, don't take my word for it. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Who's your favorite Badmiral? Let's have a conversation. I'll probably put a poll up and ask that same question because I think it's worth asking. Would love to hear who you thought. Was it the newer one, Buen Amigo, or was it some of the others I might have mentioned? Was it someone I might have missed? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. All right. With that out of the way, computer, next question.
From World of Science Fiction on Quora, Michael asks, what is the element of enjoyment that makes science fiction enjoyable for you?
That's a really great question, Michael. Thank you for asking that. If you have ever dreamed or imagined anything beyond our world, I think that's where, for me, a lot of sci-fi takes its cues. And by cues, no pun intended. I feel like the idea of, for me, I guess it might have even really gone to as far... Back to the Future sort of gave me my first idea of that there was a future as a thing. And then, of course, obviously Star Trek, I got into Star Trek. And Star Trek really helped me understand that there's a world beyond our own. And Star Trek was the first place where I fundamentally began to think a lot about, hey, what would it take for us to get that kind of world? I've always jokingly called it Gene Roddenberry socialism, but really it's more about, it's sort of this interpersonal we as mankind working for and toward a future together where we go out and explore because it's a post-scarcity type era. With the invention of the replicator, suddenly we didn't have to, we could just make things out of thin air, which means anybody could have anything, which means the acquisition of wealth and things of that nature become secondary, become not important. And so for us, it's really much more about moving forward and advancing the planet as a species. And that, again, those things capture my imagination. Movies like, Isaac Asimov's run of books, iRobot, Foundation, those kinds of things made me begin to really look at science fiction beyond. There's a level of fantasy that goes with that. And I think even in fantasy, like when I was fantasy role playing, I was really looking more for opportunities in my role playing to be able to really, how do I look to the future? How do I, whether it's steampunk or actual quote unquote future, not necessarily dystopian futures, but those are there. I'm much more of a utopian future person, i.e. Star Trek. So yeah, I think those are the elements. The elements, I guess, for me are fundamental to hope, a better tomorrow, technology, of course, technological advancement, of course, exploration, sort of the idea of opening our minds as a species, whether it's aliens or whether The Day the Earth Stood Still stands out of my mind as one of those really pivotal sci-fi movies that for me genuinely made me go, wow, what if? And I think those are big milestone moments that I feel like are worth looking into in the grand scheme of things. And I love that idea and that concept. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on that. Comment below. Let me know what you think. What are the fundamental elements of enjoyment that really make science fiction enjoyable for you as well? Would love to know more. All right, guys, with that question out of the way, let's go to the next one. Computer, next question.
From World of Science Fiction on Quora, Michael asks, among all the engineers on Star Trek, who was the most proficient and knowledgeable? What distinguishes that person from other engineers in terms of proficiency and knowledge?
I've found this question on Quora, and directly below the question itself, there was a guy who had put, why do you want to make everything a competition? And I'm like, well, because we're humans, and the idea of sort of quantifying traits is literally in us. Since the first Viking tossed a log, looked at his buddy and said, "As you can't do any better," translated from the original Viking. So we're gonna go with. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this thought exercise, and here we go. I think when you really line them all up, and we're talking about the main shows, for me, the top three sort of go Miles O'Brien from Deep Space. It has to do with difficulty, and Miles O'Brien starts at number 3. Number 3, Miles O'Brien had to do an awful lot with another species technology. When they took over Deep Space, and when Starfleet took over Deep Space Nine for the Bajoran government, when they called us in and said, "Hey, we want you guys to take the whole thing over," whatever, Miles O'Brien had a huge Herculean effort to have to do, which was translating. How are we going to get their technology to speak to our technology? At its core, a lot of our technologies are the same. They serve a lot of the same purposes. Whether you have a food replicator or food synthesizer, it's ultimately the same idea and the same concept. And so for him to have to rethink how they think into making it work with how we think, that's a huge leap. And I think it definitely puts him on the list as number 3. Number 2, I feel like is, you're going to stay with me for a second. B'Elanna Torres. B'Elanna Torres from Star Trek Voyager. She had an even more Herculean effort than Miles O'Brien. She had to maintain a Starfleet vessel basically on hopes and a prayer. 70,000 light years away from Earth. No actual viable repairing options. They didn't have full-on industrial replicators like they have now. They could replicate some smaller parts, but ultimately she had to do what she could with nothing. And even sometimes they had to be able to, they found people they could trade with and then hopefully jury rig something together completely. So she had not only the job to do that Miles O'Brien had to do, but then she also had to do it in another place with no connection to Starfleet and no ability to get regulation parts whatsoever. I think that's a massive, massive win for her. And I think it's something that's worth observing in that she worked really hard and they got from point A to point B. They got there. And it's all in the back of what she had to do as an engineer. And I think it's worth noting for sure. So who's my number one option? Now, listen, before I get all the hate, and everybody hear me out very clearly. This is not pandering. I'm explaining it. None other than Scotty, the original generation from, not necessarily TOS, whatever, Scotty the character, okay? I believe, well, obviously TOS. I believe Scotty the character is pivotal and monumental in a major way. He pretty much had to do a lot of what the others had to do, except he had nobody who had done it first. O'Brien and Torres had the journals, he wrote the book that those two followed to become amazing. He set the stage. He set the tone in a way that is unbelievable because they had never been out there before. He went where no one had gone before and actually had to make sure the ship survived not one, but 2 5-year missions. All right. And I think that that's massive. 10 years in deep space, deep exploration with very little touchback with Starfleet other than occasionally at far outlying outposts, not to mention the times they got in trouble and whatnot. So I feel like Scotty is definitively one of the best, if not the best. So that's my answer. My answers are, again, Miles O'Brien at number 3, B'Elanna Torres at number 2, and of course, Scotty at number 1. Now, where does that leave the likes of someone like Geordi LaForge, some of the others? I am going to say I believe LaForge, he gets an honorable mention. I am a product of the next generation, okay? My future exists in the 25th century. And I feel like Geordi was amazing and a miracle worker in his own right based on what Scotty did. Meaning he laid the foundation. Scotty laid the foundation of the groundwork that everyone else followed. And that's what, but Geordi did enough impressive things on his own. I say he definitely gets the honorable mention. I do believe, however, B'Elanna Torres and Miles O'Brien had to deal with things and circumstances well beyond anything Geordi had to deal with on a regular basis. So that's my answer. Those are my top 3 if I had to quantify them, because we're human beings and it's kind of what we do. So there you go. Now you know. Don't have the battle you have with yourself. I hope you guys take each opportunity to comment down below. Let me know give me your top 3. And I'm fine. You want to go into Enterprise, you want to go into Discovery, I'm totally down. But I definitely feel like when it comes to people who had to do a lot with a little, you'd start with Scotty and move forward from there. Arguments obviously can be made for many others, but I would love to hear those arguments. We'll talk more about it below in the comments. Okay. So with that out of the way, computer, give me the next question.
From physics on Quora, is it possible to achieve warp speed? If so, what would be the process of building a ship capable of achieving it, and what potential challenges might arise for the ship and its crew?
Okay, that's great. Thank you for the 3-parter physics on Quora. Leaving it up to a bunch of actual science reality nerds to come to the science fiction nerds for their answers. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so let's break the question down into its parts. Is it possible? So, by today's standards, no. That's the simplest answer I can give you. Now, we live in Star Trek land. This is for the future. So, by tomorrow's standards, maybe. And if so, what would the process be of building a ship sort of capable of achieving it? Well, let's see. Lots and lots of years, and for guys like you to work with the applied physics and mechanical engineering people to sort of make it happen. Basically, get the guys from Big Bang Theory. Well, no, seriously though, what challenges might arise for ship and crew? Part of the biggest challenge you're going to face is, so what is warp? What does it mean to do all this? I think the idea behind Star Trek and its warp and all this other stuff is essentially, and at its easiest to try to convey from a fictional standpoint, is that the idea of, you have several factors. First and foremost is the idea of when you're traveling at faster than light or moving in that sort of at warp, so to speak, debris is a big problem. So what does the ships have? Each of the ships has in front of it this little dish guy. And it's not just for looking fancy. That's what is the deflector dish. What does the deflector dish do? It does exactly what it sounds like. At all given points while moving forward, It is moving forward it is an energy field. It is an invisible energy field that moves forward and moves debris out of the way. It's very much like a reverse tractor beam in that regard, only it's creating sort of an energy scoop. So in essence, it's funny, there was a book once that gave the design. Warp theory is that a warp shell is created, and the warp shell moves in such a way that looks very much like a chevron, like the delta. This symbol symbolizes warp speed. The little star in the middle normally is the star that's your ship, so to speak. The point at the front is created by your deflector dish, because you have to deflect things coming forward. You have to create sort of that triangular effect, thus allowing things to roll off those front shields and whatnot, and not hurt you. Now, another real life issue of faster than light travel, warp if you will, we're talking about time dilation theory. Time dilation is the concept that the faster you move, more time passes on Earth than is passing for you in the warp bubble, in warp. So you might go out 3 hours, 3 days. Let's use days as a simple example. And by the way, this is not how time dilation works. If you want that, please go to a science channel. There are many, many science channels out there that will probably give you actual scientifically based answers. Mr. Know-It-All is giving you an answer based in fictional engineering science for Star Trek. Okay? And in fact, warp is the concept that at warp, we are not... the reason why warp works the way it does, time dilation is not even a thing. But in real life, moving faster than light, time would become an issue. So for every day you travel, let's say, because again, this is fictional, about 10 years passes on Earth. Not even 1 year passes on Earth. So you're gone for 3 days, 3 years have passed. And you come back 3 days later, 3 more years have passed. You've been out for 6 years. Now again, none of these are accurate time frames. Please understand that. Mr. Know-It-All is not a scientist. I'm just a genuine busybody who knows things. So at the end of the day, those are major hurdles to get past. I would think another one would ultimately be supplies, because in the time it takes you to move and do certain things, you'd have to be able to keep yourself supplied proficiently, as it were. And I feel like those are huge things to keep in consideration. So yeah, hopefully, there you go. Now you know. Don't have to battle your applicant, but you know it all yourself. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please comment below. Let me know your thoughts on what you think. Is warp speed possible? I would love for my real life scientists out there, people who understand science for real, to jump in the comments and sort of educate us, because I'm all about that. That is literally what this channel is about, is educating you, making you a know-it-all the same way I am, which at its fundamental core is really about having fun and enjoying some things. So hopefully someone down in the comments will be able to give us more accurate an answer. Until next time, though, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Computer, give me the next question.
Justin Kress asks, recently I came across someone who thought Star Trek Voyager's B'Elanna Torres was too Klingon and should have been used to show Latin culture simply because Roxann Dawson, the actress who portrayed her, was Latina. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, that's such an interesting question. B'Elanna Torres was too Klingon and should have been used to show Latin culture. First off, Mr. Know-It-All is Puerto Rican. So I had this question, and I was a Klingon in my persona for Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Club, which I'm no longer a part of, but I was a commissioned chief engineer, later on a commander of the USS Starquest, which was, up until probably a few years back, which was a ship in good standing. My thought is, I disagree, and I feel like the point of Star Trek is to take real life and then create allegorical mythology. So these are stories that teach us something through the characters and the various interactions therein. Klingons were a stand-in for Cold War Russia, Romulans were based on the communist China, etc., etc., etc. I think that B'Elanna comes in as sort of, she's a half-breed, if you will. Half Klingon, half human, her half-human side, Torres, being Latina. She was a great allegory. There are very few 100% hardcore. There's almost no Borinqueño, which are the original Indians that made up the Puerto Ricans. Okay, there's no Aztecs anymore. What you have are Mexicans, and you have Puerto Ricans, and you have Hondurans, and Argentinians, and Spaniards, and the whole bit. Everyone's mixed with something else. We all are very much that combination. And if you ask any one of them, some of our women are hot-headed, some of our men are whatever else, and you have all these things and combinations and everything else. I believe she was exactly what she needed to be, which was within the concept of an allegory. She was that Latina presence aboard the Voyager and within the Star Trek universe. Obviously, today we love to have, our characters are diverse and this and that, everything else. Absolutely. But I definitely feel like her being that allowed for the series to tell unique stories from a perspective she could come from. And I think that was a great place, very important place nonetheless. So yeah, there you go. Now you know. And always have the battle. I'm never going to know yourself. So with that all out of the way, let's go to the next question. Computer, next question.
In a fight, who would win between Shinzon from Star Trek Nemesis and Nero from Star Trek Into Darkness?
This is a death match. Okay, so the death match is about to begin. That means we need to put shields up and let's get into this thing. Computer, roll that deathmatch intro.
Hypothetical deathmatch mode. Program complete. Enter when ready.
Okay, so the two people who are going to be faced off in this deathmatch is Shinzon from Star Trek Nemesis and Nero from the 2009 requel of Star Trek with J.J. Abrams. Let's get into this. Computer, do me a favor. Run through the tale of the tape.
Shinzon was a clone of human Starfleet Captain Jean-Luc Picard, initially created by the Romulans for the purpose of replacing Picard with a Romulan agent. Shinzon later became the leader of the Reman people, staging a successful coup d'etat against the Romulan Senate and plotting the annihilation of Earth in the name of Reman freedom. Nero was a Romulan miner originating from the 24th century and the captain of the mining vessel Narada. Following the destruction of Romulus in 2387, Nero sought vengeance against those he felt were responsible, ultimately resulting in his being transported back in time to 2233.
Okay, so clearly both of these guys are pretty strong fighters in their own right. If you look head-to-head through the entire matchup, I think what really comes out clearly is that you have the likes of Nero, who's a very, very physical combatant, and then you have the likes of Shinzon, who, while he has combat training and is physically combative, he has a much more interesting background in that he grew up in the mines of Remus, and he also has physical military training. Nero doesn't have military training. Nero's a miner. He's not only a miner, but he's a miner who got himself some Borg technology and who has got a very powerful ship. I feel like let's take this in 3 rounds. Round 1, straight up, when you face Nero versus Shinzon, I believe Shinzon takes the win intellectually. I believe firmly his military training and his prowess as a warrior take the cake. Now, you go physical, Nero versus Shinzon. I think Nero comes through physically on top and wins that particular matchup. Then when you have their ships, you've got the Narada versus the Scimitar. I believe while the Scimitar is considered more, they're like, that is definitely a bird of prey, in literal, not the name of the ship. Meaning that is a ship designed to hunt people down. But the Narada has Borg technology, and I think the Narada wins out in a battle of ships.
Fire everything!
That literally puts 2 for Nero and 1 for Shinzon. In my opinion, it is undoubtedly Nero comes out on top. Thank you so much. I really hope that this amazing deathmatch matchup has given you something to think about. If you disagree, let's talk about it in the comments below. I want to have a conversation for sure and see who you think wins in a matchup head to head. Guys, I have genuinely enjoyed this opportunity to come at you at the Know It All Files. Got some really interesting stuff coming up down the pike. Pay close attention to the other episodes as they start to come out soon. Submit your questions right here in the comments section, or of course, if you're going to go to Quora or some other, or if you want to follow us on X or some of the other threads, even, I guess that's a thing. Whatever you do, just use the hashtag Know It All Files, all one word, Know It All Files, and I will happily read your questions and ask them online. How have you liked the computer's voice? Did you enjoy what you had to say? I totally did. Thank you so much, computer, for all your help today. Right on. All right, guys. Well, never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.